Hi, welcome to Meaningful Media. Here I talk about anything that has to do with me or Mongolia or both. And this is the series called Watch Mongolian Movies with Me. Here I talk about Mongolia through the means of media. Today we're going to talk about this movie called Humus. And it's really hard to translate it and localize it into English, but I'm just going to crudely translate it into rare people. And let me know if you agree with my translation after you finish this video. So this movie was made in 1987, and the settings of the movie is the Mongolia of 1980s, and the major contribution to the country's economy is made and created by the... Sorry about that, I've been saying it wrong. It's pastoral industry, not pastoral industry. Basically, the productivity of the herder is the most important thing. So the nomadic herders who previously managed and looked after their own livestock with no one to really report to now have a deadline to meet, the goals to exceed, and KPIs to remember. Now a herder belongs to this organization unit called Herders Union, and in the Herders Union there are like several other herders who report to a boss, and that boss reports to the next boss and to the next boss, on and on and on. It's not just the settings and the premise of the movie, but it's a real system that existed in Mongolia during our socialist era, which continued from 1930s to 1990. And this movie depicts the adventures of one of those union bosses. And his name is Sereenen. He is a man with wits and tricks up his sleeve. And although he doesn't have to get sunburned looking after his livestock in the prairie, or meddle with their stinky poop, or suffer days on end just to shear them so that he can submit their wool, he also has some quotas to meet. And the problem is his union does not have a labor champion. And the labor champion is a title given to a herder who's just, so laborious and like hardworking, outperforms everyone and things like that. And like his union not having any labor champion means his herders are just barely scratching by. They're just meeting the quotas and they're not going above and beyond. Oh my God, I hate this word. Which reflects badly on him because he's not making his herders work hard. So it becomes important for him to find and support the next labor champion so that he looks good, right? And by the bank of the river, he goes through the list of potential herders that he can support to become a labor champion. So first on the list is Handa, who is a goat herder, and she's definitely very hardworking, but she always got something to say and something to point out during meetings. She's kind of like a bitch, And another candidate is a horseman called Mandach. He's really good with horses, but he has a strange scar on his face. And the next option in his mind is Durima. She's also a goat herder, and she works hard, but not the hardest of worker. But the thing is, she is a relative of a boss, and also she is good looking. So if she becomes a labor champion, her face card will pay off in a great PR for his union, which is really good for him. So he decides to support Durima to help her become a labor champion. Now, isn't the purpose of choosing a labor champion so that it kind of incentivizes the herders to work hard and it helps them to work hard? So by that metric, just run the numbers and see who's meeting their goals, meeting their KPIs constantly. It's just about looking at the numbers. But he is selecting based on superficial reasons, like one's likeness, one's appearance, and then essentially he resorts to nepotism. I think we know the reason why his union is lagging behind. So Sereenen takes it upon himself to teach and train Durima to become his union's labor champion by telling her to smile and welcome the state officials like they are the leaders of the country. He has two sidekicks, and one of them is called Samdang. He's the bald guy. He's basically Sereenen's yes man. He is like his butler. He grabs every chance to second everything that Sereenen says, and he's the first one to shout at whoever pushes back at Sereenen slightly. Well, there's only one person who pushes back at Sereenen. His name is Gomp, the man standing next to something. He's a veterinarian of the union, and so in his classic fashion, he questions whether they need to welcome the state officials with milk and ceremonial scarf, because they're not like the leader of a country. They're not like the president of everything, right? Whilst they are debating the each second of how they should welcome the state officials, a truck pulls up on them. And this is Tumur. He's a new herder in the union assigned to herd goats. And you want to guess what Sereenen says to him? You know, he's too young and inexperienced. So he assigns Tumur to work as an assistant just in general, assistant to anyone who needs some assisting. And his first task is to get tires for the union tractor. He was assigned to bring 4 tires, but he has to go through multiple levels of authorization, which means from person to person, the number they get requested gets approved half. He eventually goes back to the union with 1 tire. But the thing is, on the request paper, it was written 14 tires, and he thought that Toya, the secretary, had made a mistake because he knew he was told to bring 4 tires. So he took it upon himself to fix the number and erase the digit 1 from the paper. But the thing is, Toya and the rest of the, union leaders knew that the supply office tends to be very prudent and frugal in general. So his first task, Tumur fails miserably, and something shouts at him for meddling with official documents, essentially saving few seconds from Serenen's rants. But it's not his mistake necessarily. He didn't know the bureaucracy and the way things work. It's just someone should have just said that to him. They are usually very prudent. So we wrote 14, don't do anything with the paper. And as a person who is a little bit on the spectrum, self-diagnosed, by the way, there's this strange culture in any office, especially when you're a recent hire, that you're not really told the way things work. You have to figure it out, and you have to learn and suffer on your own. It's almost like a phrasing or pranking culture. Like you have to suffer like how we did to become one of us, which just confuses everything. So the long-awaited arrival of the state official finally comes. They pull up with the fastest car to the bestest herder of Sereenen's union. Durima and the other beauties of the union welcomed them with a warm smile, just as Sereenen reminded about 1,000 times. And then Sereenen proceeds to just yap and talk about the best practices of his best herder, which includes washing the faces of the goats and wiping their back with a wet towel. And also, Durima's base has a parking lot with its parking sign and a cement walkway to the yurt and porch and flower garden, all the essentials for a nomadic herder. Not only that, she knows her goats by name and their personality, and that's why she's the best herder of his union. She even has a schedule to feed her goats. And Sereenen just keeps doing his best to be on the soft side of the state official and takes him on a yurt hop and feeds him with the best of the samples. And the state official, after a few bowls of milk vodka, cries about how his bosses always scold him for not doing his work well, whilst he's suffering in countryside several hours on a dirt road, day in and day out, just complaining whilst having a fresh new meat right in front of him. So back to Tumur. He is working hard as an assistant to the regional best herder Durima, and the state official visits her base a little more frequently than necessary, so she has to keep up with the static of her base whilst Tumur is doing all the real work. Like, he's feeding the goats, he's washing their faces, even collecting hay for the winter, all the tasks that Durima is responsible as a potential best herder of Sereenen's union. So Tumur is basically shadowing the best herder, but now Durima is just all spoiled because Tumur is doing all the work. And Tumur also gets written up a lot due to a minor mistake here and there, but he and his other colleagues basically have gotten used to this because it's so frequently done without any major consequences. And it becomes a strange thing where people are not afraid of being written up because there's no real consequences. But I think it's the lack of management skill from Sereenen. He thinks he's ruling with ironclad, but it's at the end just a fear tactic, and it works good few times, but after many times it just becomes another noise that people get used to with no change in their behavior. But because Tumur is still quite new, he's been avoiding Sereenen after being caught not being in his base because he went to hunt marmots. So when he saw his boss's car, he dashes off on his horse. So a little bit about the socialist time of Mongolia. And even now, it is such a dividing topic among the people because some people say the socialist time was pretty good because we were well on our way to become a major manufacturing country, and we had plenty of factories for shoes and leather and milk product, and we were just using the raw material created by pastoral industry, and everyone had a job. You had to have a job. There's no opportunity for people to be jobless. Yeah, we still have factories and things like that, but most of them are very much privatized, and there are other people who criticize the socialist era because of lack of diversity in thinking. You have to do what you're told. You didn't have that much of a freedom, personal freedom, no personal property and things like that. And people were incentivized by empty titles like labor champion or 5-year champion, or they were incentivized by fear. Because if you wanted to do things, at every level, there's a boss, and they're very angry if you don't meet the quota or if you don't try to appease him. If you don't meet your quota, your salary is cut off, you're demoted, you're barred from opportunities and promotions and apartment. And that's what's happening to Sereenen because he's called to the provincial town to receive some scolding because his plan is not working well. All this time, he has been putting resources in Durima's goat base, but it seems like the other herders were left on their own. And whilst he's in provincial town, the state official visits his office and tells Samden to relocate Durima because now they are getting married. And Samden, being a yes man to any boss, sends Durima away without any official letter that he also respects. So Sereenen's exact plan backfires horribly, and his potential best goat herder is now taken away. So there's no prospect for his union to have a labor champion, and her goats are now left with no one to feed according to a clear set schedule, and her flower garden is left without watering. No experienced herder wants to take on a very high maintenance goats that require their faces washed and backs rubbed. That's just simply not the way to herd animals. Especially goats, they are considered very high maintenance because they like to graze in a very nutritious pasture, and they like to go up so high and jump around, so they need constant monitoring. And Durima's base was a stationary base. She just fed them with supplements, the supplements that could have been dispersed more equally, and the goats were kept inside a fence. And the only person who can find his way around these goats is the person who has been washing their backs, Tumur. And Tumur was wanting to have his own livestock, so he happily takes on the role, and the first thing he did was to get the fuck out of the fence. Soon after, another state official from the town comes, and Sereenen still wants to bring them to his best base. But the goats nor Tumur are just nowhere to be found. And Sereenen never learns his lesson, does he? Because, like, did he tell Timur to smile at the state official too? They eventually find him in the field, in the pasture, like a real herder, letting his livestock breathe some fresh air and pitching up a tent in the middle of nowhere and sleeping alone at night. And Sereenen's first instinct is to just scold him for moving without approval and not using the supplement that was given to him. But the state official sees it right through, and he's happy to be seeing a real herder at work. Because Timur actually has been exchanging experiences and best practices with another herder, Horla, but she's from a different union. See, such a simple solution, just like, let them learn and share the knowledge with the best. However, instead of thinking like, oh, this is the solution, maybe just learn from other herders, just hear them out and just fucking swallow your pride, Sereenen sees something else. He thinks that Timur and Horla are into each other, and by marrying them, he can easily have a champion in his union. And whilst Sereenen is sharing his stupid plan with Samdang, Toya overhears it and gets disappointed as she and Timur were dating.
Энэ хоёрыг суулгах юм. Аврагч манайгаар дороод ирэн дэх. Тэгвэл хорлоо аврагч нь манай бэр болох шивдэ. Тэгэлгүй яах. Худлаа. Юу худлаа гэж? Юу гинэ вэ? Кринч. Яадаг.
And Sereenen keeps interpreting things wrongly and would take Timur to meet Horla in his car. But again, his plan fails miserably as Horla is actually in love with someone else in his union. And that man would be relocating to her union because it has a better leadership and better career opportunities. So even after such maneuvers and planning, the number of labor champions in his union is still zero. Nada. And now Timur, the guy who he thought less of because he's young and inexperienced, is his only potential option because he has passion for this shit. Like, he's willing to learn. And most importantly, he loves his animals. But he got an offer from a university to further his studies. And if he does that, his livestock should be given to someone else. And when Sereenen was about to suffer just thinking about it, Timur suggests that the secretary, Toya, should be the one because she was awarded twice as a best potential herder. This Sereenen did not know at all because when she was assigned to work at his union, he didn't even bother to check her resume. Because, again, she's young and inexperienced. And she was kept as a secretary for 2 years. So after saying this, Timur also then changes his mind and decides to stay in his union, but he wants to herd his livestock with Toya and basically taking the relationship to the next level. And then he leaves the office. And Sereenen then blames her for not telling about it. But Gomp says that some people are a bit reserved and some people just don't like to boast around. And it's actually the manager, the union boss's job to find such people and support them. And Sereenen asks if Gomp wants to write him up too, half-jokingly, but then Samdang just seizes the chance to lick Sereenen's butt and says that Gomp is blasphemous. And Sereenen basically gives up all hopes of having a labor champion in his union and just sulks around in sadness, probably looking for someone to scold. But then by some magic, one of his herders, his most disliked herder, Handa, has met the requirements to become a labor champion, but Sereenen has been calling her names and would discourage her because she always have something extra to say. She even came to him asking for supplement, but he had been spoon-feeding it to Durima's base and didn't give it to her. And this makes him think that he should get training because he's just not good at leading a team. I think he should be fired. And he says whilst he's on training, he would be putting Gomp as his deputy, not something. And that was such a satisfactory moment for me. Outside of his office, in the parking lot, cars of state officials pulls up. And instead of shaking like a dog, he decides to sit still and work. So there it is. There's a story of the typical herders union and how a very unqualified person is doing a job of a leader. So I think this movie was a satire at how the system was flawed in the socialist era. Given the movie was made in 1987, just 3 years before Mongolia became a democratic country, you can just think that even through art, people were kind of like questioning how the system was working. And because we had a system where people were incentivized by like title or by fear, and it was backfiring, adding unnecessary pressure to people. And at the same time, the concept of human labor and work and productivity was and is co-opted by management and ruling class. Because just think about Tumur. He's a young and studious man. He wants to work. He wants to put labor into something, because working is not so alien to humanity. And we have undertaken actions and tasks since our caveman days, because work in our mind was a process through which we created our own survival, herding and hunting animals, putting seed on the ground and growing it with our tears and sweat. We were able to seize the means of our work as it turned into the very thing that our survival depended on. Our hunt became food, and its hides became clothes, and we grew plants, and we used other plants to build shelter, and it created community because we hunted together, we grinded together. But in the modern world, the means that we achieve through work is money. It's great and all, but it's not of nature. It is something through which we try to buy our survival. And it separates the joy and deep meaning that we get from work and job and turns it into soulless repetition of things to do so that we can survive. And your boss is constantly pressuring you to perform without regard can make it very daunting, and especially if you have a boss like Sereenen. I think he should be actually fired because he was the bottleneck in productivity of his union. He's blocking people from career development. He doesn't question his own biases. He's very nepotistic. The reason he wants to prepare for labor champion is because of how it looks on him, how it's his reputation, not because he's supporting his herder with necessary resources or listening to their voices without having his judgment clouded by his preference, like how he does with Handma, who in the end becomes the light of hope. It is also an issue from the decision-making level because, if it didn't break, don't fix it. And if Sereenen's union is meeting quotas and things are being produced, it means it's not broken, so don't fix it. Sereenen's boss also pressured him to have a labor champion and not only meet quotas. It's like the system asks for more and more and more, like a cancer spreading through a body without thinking about how it affects the very ecosystem that they are operating inside. Sounds familiar? And this over-systemification breaks everything, especially if the system only values numbers and not what's creating or going into that number. So there it is, guys. So this is the story of how one of the most important economic machine, this pastoral industry, was running in our socialist era. I hope it was interesting for you. I have many other movies that I have dissected that have similar or different topics, and I have also other videos that you can check out if that interests you, and I will be very happy to see you on the next one. Thank you. Bye.